Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a little bit of time now since Charlie Kirk's assassination. I thought we'd catch up with the news to see what's happening. And to be honest, there's quite a bit happening. But before we do, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and please forward this video on. I'd really like to get the message out around what's going on. So the first is, as you know, the conservative Charlie Kirk, the co-founder of Turning Point USA, was shot dead on September 10th, 2025 at Utah University during his American Comeback Tour. He was speaking outdoors at a Prove Me Wrong debate event when a single rifle shot hit him in the neck. Now, the shooter appeared to fire from the rooftop of a nearby building. Now, the weapon has since been recovered, and it's a high-powered bolt-action rifle. I don't know why we use the phrase high-powered, but that's the way it's described. When specifically, it's a Mauser 30-06. So it's a hunting rifle, effectively. It was found in a wooded area where the suspect is believed to have fled. Now, there were some spent cartridges, there were some palm prints found, some shoe impressions, and some video surveillance. And no doubt you probably would have seen the video surveillance of the individual apparently running from rooftops and jumping off buildings and so forth. Now, all of the evidence is being investigated, and apparently the person of interest is described as college-aged. Now, if you've seen the Netflix documentary of Don't F with Cats, then you'll know that the minute you put these things online, the online investigation community goes out and finds stuff. And the current news, now please understand that it's a person of interest, this might not actually be the individual, is that an individual has been identified. The FBI did put out some pictures of the suggested individual, and they asked the public for assistance in identifying who he is. Now, online investigators found an individual who seems to match the appearance of the supposed shooter, and there's a number of videos circulating around who the individual might be. And in typical fashion, it's, well, exactly who you thought it was going to be. It's a college-aged individual, an individual who had previously debated with Charlie Kirk, and the individual is very angry. The individual seems to be pushing forward forms of LGBT narrative and seems to argue quite a lot with Charlie Kirk. Now, the individual had also gone on to Suno, the online AI song creator, and he had created songs around how Charlie Kirk dies at 31, and this was prior to the event. So it does look like there was a degree of premeditation. With that being said, this is all speculative. I really want to highlight that. It's all speculative. At this point in time, we don't know. The FBI has released the pictures, but they say they don't really want to release too much because they're worried that their manhunt could ensue and people could, in theory, take justice into their own hands. Now, the world has responded, and we have seen a number of Democrats and Republicans alike denounce the shooting as a politically motivated assassination. Now, President Donald Trump called it a heinous assassination and labeled it the radical left, which, to be honest, is not really wrong. Now, he has said that he will be issuing a medal to Charlie Kirk for heroism, and officials have called on the public to help identifying the individual with a reward of $100,000 being put up for information leading to the identification or capture of the shooter. So that's pretty much what's happened. Now, let's start off this by saying that some college students had gathered to pray for Charlie Kirk. As you can see, there's no looting, no violence, no hate. Now, Charlie Kirk was very famous for saying that his faith really mattered to him, and in a display of solidarity, a number of students gathered to pray for him. You can see the video here.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Now, some individuals have gone back and actually watched the shooting event and noted that an individual was seen celebrating the minute that Charlie Kirk was shot. And so this individual has now become famous. And apparently it's an astronomer or science communicator from Chicago, Illinois. So individuals are looking for him. Apparently, he is a suspect of interest himself. And you can see the video here where he was identified. Now, in the European Parliament, they did call for a minute's silence to remember Charlie Kirk, and whilst Conservatives stood up to honour him, many EU politicians, noticeably leftist politicians, declined to be involved in the minute's silence. Now, the actual individual who stood up and said that he wanted to give away his 1 minute speech time to give a moment of silence, well, the leftists weren't happy with that, and so they denied his request, and noticeably it did cause a bit of a ruckus in the EU. But it does show you that the EU is just a leftist captured organization. In fact, you can see the video here yourself. Now, not being able to read the room, the EFF went off and issued a press statement of their own. Now, the actual statement itself is around the 2026 FIFA World Cup, in which the EFF notices the assassination of Charlie Kirk and decries the gun culture and the mass shootings that occur almost weekly, according to them, and how unsafe the United States is for kids in the classrooms. Now, we actually have to look at this a little bit because, again, the EFF who claims that they have superior knowledge are really just, well, retarded. The United States has a population of 335 million. South Africa has a population of 60 million. Gun ownership is at 120 guns per 100 people. South Africa has 9.7 guns per 100 people. Now, if you look at it, South Africa has 4.5 million licensed firearm owners and a number of, well, illegal firearm owners, as I'm sure you know. Then the current estimations are roughly around half. So it's around half of our gun ownership is legal, half of our gun ownership is not legal. Now, with the US having 120 guns per 100 people and South Africa having, well, less than 10, you would expect that South Africa has a lower crime rate. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. In terms of gun murders, the US has 5.6 gun murders per 100,000 people, and South Africa has 45. So the South Africa, which has less firearms, has more firearm deaths. So what nonsense is the EFF talking? In fact, South Africa is more unsafe than the United States, with a smaller population and less gun ownership. So as we know, causality doesn't always equal causation, but in this instance, you could say, well, effectively, less gun ownership means more crime. So the EFF were just retarded. In any case, you can see that the New York Times, in typical fashion, immediately started to say that Charlie Kirk died at 31, and the phrase murdered seems to have been, well, removed from all forms of reporting. When it came through to other leftist-type figures, we all had to hear about how they were murdered, but Charlie Kirk, just died. Well, died from what, guys? Just died? He just killed over and died? I mean, who knew? Now, the Oxford University has a new president for their student union, and that individual went out and glorified the death of Charlie Kirk because, as you can see by the individual in question, well, they weren't exactly a fan. Now, in other news, RTV thought that it would be a really good idea to invite an individual on who has been described by Tommy Robinson as a race grifter. And this individual was asked to comment on the death of Charlie Kirk. Now, what you'll see that the RTV presenters do not challenge the individual, and he spouts off all sorts of nonsense. But what I noticed the most is that when it came down to the George Floyd murders, every white person was told that they don't have any skin in the game and they could not talk for George Floyd. In fact, there were numerous instances where we were told by a number of DEI specialists that, according to Robin DiGiangelo's critical race theory book rubbish, white people cannot talk about black issues because we're all racist, but apparently the shoe doesn't fit on the other foot.
Isn't this
Not everything in the United Kingdom is completely bonkers. In fact, you can actually see right here this video from a patriot in the United Kingdom who says that free speech will never die and that Charlie's death will not be in vain. In fact, you can watch the video right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here in Birmingham, Quinton, on Western Boulevard. First and foremost, I want to say rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. What a terrible tragedy that's happened to the Western civilization and free speech. Take a look at these flags. These are no longer just about the UK, Wales, Scotland, Ireland. These stand for freedom of speech. So this here is for Charlie Kirk as well. And it's no longer about a fucking flag. This is about defending democracy, freedom of speech, and the Western civilization, British culture, Western civilization as we know it. We will not back down. We never will. We never have. Right? Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. God bless your soul. The Woolly Warriors inspired the next generation of patriots here in the UK, and they've inspired me to do what I do. So let's keep getting behind this movement, keep flying that flag, raise the colours and defend our future. Thank you, God bless.
Now, in typical fashion, the UK Parliament didn't really actually have a lot to say about the death of Charlie Kirk. In fact, the only person who was brave enough to talk about it to an empty room was the MP, Rupert Lowe. Now, Rupert did actually issue a speech in which he said that Charlie Kirk was incredibly brave and that he had put himself into the firing line by speaking up about things that matter. And you can see that video right here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I concur with the comments about Charlie Kirk, which the Minister made at the beginning. It shows the dangers, I think, that anybody who's brave enough to put themselves up for public service and try and change the world for the better, they risk those. They face those risks.
But you know, one of the things I did notice following the death of Charlie Kirk was the distinct lack of respect to the dead. In fact, you could immediately see after he was shot, there were students at the university who immediately started to steal hats from the vacant booth as Charlie Kirk was rushed off. One of the hallmarks of a decent society is the respect given for the dead. And what we can clearly see is that there's no respect for the dead. In fact, you can watch that right here.
Yeah. Grab me out. Hey, yo, grab me out. Let's go up, guys. Come on. Let's go up, guys. I don't know. Let's go. I have no idea. Let's go. Come on, guys. What are you doing? Get the fuck out. Let's go.
Now, love him or hate him, Andrew Tate went online and gave a speech himself and did say that actually, the media aren't going to report on this very positively. In fact, according to him, the reason that they will not do that they will not give Charlie Kirk a fair hearing is because he doesn't say things that the media find fits their narrative. And you can watch that video right here.
As a man, if you're not getting shot at, you're not doing the right things. If they're not coming at you in the news, you're not doing the right things. If they're not saying you're a bad person, you're not doing the right things. If they're not trying to lock you away, you're not doing the right things. If they're not trying to shut you up, you're not doing the right things. As a man, the number one marker you have of monumental success and being on the correct path on this planet is haters, doubters, and enemies who are trying their very best to stifle your efforts. That is the easiest way to look yourself in the mirror and know you are doing the right thing.
But you never be alone. I'll be with you from dusk till dawn.
Now, I must say, one of the things that I did find unsurprising was that immediately following the death of Charlie Kirk, because the sniper hadn't immediately been caught, a number of conspiracy theories started to revolve around the internet. And the first and most typical one is that, well, Charlie Kirk was killed by the Israelis. I mean, it's always the Israelis. The Israelis do everything wrong. I mean, it's the Jews' fault, clearly. I mean, this type of insano logic did have a little bit of credibility in that Charlie Kirk had been growing a little bit more vocal around some of the issues that occurred in Israel. And news coming out of Fox News is that the FBI had claimed that there was a little bit of foreign intelligence involvement in Charlie Kirk's assassination, was supposedly led to the credibility that it could have been a foreign nation involved in his assassination. But the reality is that who this foreign intelligence was and who this country was, well, didn't really matter because in typical fashion, everybody wanted to hate on Israel, and would you know it, that's what they did. Now, numerous people highlighted a debate that Charlie Kirk had with Ben Shapiro as their evidence to basically corroborate this conspiracy theory. But the reality is what we have now seen is that, according to the current news, the shooter was exactly who we thought it was going to be. There was no state involvement, it wasn't the Jews, it wasn't Israel, it wasn't any of that crazy rubbish. It was exactly who we had come to expect to be the shooter. It was going to be an insano, radical college leftist who had been indoctrinated into leftist-type ideas. And this prompted some newsreaders on Fox News to make what I can only describe as startling observations. In fact, you can watch them right here yourself.
If you look at what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually is, it's just a fancy way to say anti-white. And if things don't change and people keep getting kicked out of multicultural centers or stop from getting jobs just because of their skin color, then white people are going to have to start their own civil rights movement because things have gotten way too woke and just toxic.
Now, the leftist ideologue whose rifle and ammunition had supposedly been found, it was confirmed that the ammunition had apparently been engraved with transgender and anti-fascist messages. Now, what's interesting about that is apparently this is a new MO. These rifles and the ammunition quite frequently have these type of slogans actually printed on the side. Where this came from, I don't know, maybe too many movies. But the reality of the news is that, as some individual highlighted, Charlie Kirk's murder in the Jewish and Israeli communities was, well, to be honest, really unifying. Every politician, rabbi, and just every citizen feels impacted. Many of the rabbis went on Fox News and called him the Abraham of our time. To the Jewish community, Charlie Kirk was a hero. And that's because Charlie Kirk was very vocal about his support of Jewish individuals in Israel as a whole. And so to many of them, they see Charlie Kirk's death as basically the loss of a key ally. But no matter what you might think about the good or the bad of Charlie Kirk, one of the things that we all have to sit back and take credence to is that Charlie Kirk was a father, and his 2 kids will now grow up without a father. It's a very young age to lose a father, and it is life-altering to many of them. Their father's death was broadcast around the world in the most public manner, and so we have to give our thoughts and prayers to the children and the family. And in usual fashion, many individuals took to the internet to create videos celebrating the life of Charlie with his children, and you can see one of those right here.
I love you.
I love you too.
Gigi, you don't just get everything you want. Okay. Well, you have to be on very good behavior to get such a thing like this. Okay? Hold on. You have to behave well.
Did you earn it?
I know, but what did you do for it? Have you been a good girl? Okay, I'll get it for you.
In any case, ladies and gentlemen, that's the news. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you more. I wish they had found the killer and we could get a motive, but at this point in time, we're still monitoring the updates. But what we can say is that some of the news around this is really, really divisive. But you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.
South Africa is what, 75% black? Is that correct? 80%? Maybe
Yeah,
more?
that's right.
Right. And so explain to me, like post-apartheid, outside of the land ownership, maybe there's a business element. Why is it that once apartheid was removed, why black South Africans were not able to see their material economic net worth go up in the last 20 or 30 years? What do you think there's any, and maybe I don't know enough, are there any cultural inhibitions of a defeatist attitude that has basically, let's say, infected the minds of poor South Africans last 20 years that feel as if they can't accumulate wealth? Do you think that plays a factor?
Yeah, I think what's really infected black South Africans is pretty much going back what we're talking about. Obviously, from the colonial background that I just gave you, and we see a lot of like neo-colonialism, you control the supply chains, and you own 72% of agricultural farmland. How do you expect the majority black people to improve their lives and their outcomes when you pretty much control everything?
Enough. And so this is a sloppy but best example I can give. Is that fair? I'll do it. So just grant me some mercy here. What percentage of American land is owned by Asians?
Not sure.
Yeah, less than 3%. They are the richest racial group in America. So maybe land ownership isn't the only thing that matters to get wealthy. Land is basically all owned by white people in America, okay? Yet Asians, Indians are by far the richest group. So why is it that this particular group that happens to own the land and the supply chains, and we've admitted it's very hard to run this land, very hard to run this idea of farming in South Africa, it feels to me, I could be wrong, that it's a group of resentment-driven politics towards a group of people that own land instead of opportunity and empowerment-based politics talking to the black majority about how they could build a better life for themselves instead of taking away other people's stuff. I don't know South African law enough. I don't know if it's a free market base. I really don't. I'm not just playing cute. But as a general operating principle, it's very bad to build a political movement around taking other people's stuff because obsessed with what you don't have instead of the mental energy to create what you want and what you think you deserve. So my postulation, and I'm glad you admitted it, don't say kill the Boers. Bad. We should say that. It has created real deaths and real harm. If I was in charge, which of course I'm not, I would spend all my time not saying kill the Boer, kill the Boer. I would say, my people, get your act together. Let's work harder. Let's prove the Boer wrong. Let's start a business. Let's build families. One is driven in resentment and greed and envy and confiscation, and one is rooted in creation and entrepreneurship and optimism. I'd like to see the latter.
Well,